All right, well, why don't we get rolling here? Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for today's off-campus housing information session. Happy to have you here. I'll have my Zoom camera on just for this slide and this slide only, and we'll talk about some ground rules here for the Zoom in just a moment. But my name's Andrew Kopstein, pronouns are he, him, his. I'm the Assistant Director for Off-Campus Student Living here in the Office of the Dean of Students at Boston College. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight. A little bit about me. I'm a transplant, so I moved from St. Louis, Missouri to Boston about 8 or so-ish years ago. This is my 9th year at the university. I previously was a graduate resident director as well as a resident director on campus, so I can talk about life on campus, certainly RA experiences, and a handful of years ago moved into the off-campus student living role. And I can talk with you, of course, all about that, which we will today. I recently graduated with my Master's of Business Administration and also have my Master's of Higher Ed from Boston College, so I'm a double eagle. We also have with us in our unit Nathaniel Anorgiama. He is an international higher education graduate student here to help ensure that everybody is assisted in their search for off-campus housing. So before we jump in for today, just want to kind of give you some rules of the road. One, I'd ask that you ensure that your microphone is off for the duration of the program. I am easily distracted, and by having that microphone off, it ensures that I can stay on track and we can finish in a timely manner. I'm going to have my video off. You're welcome to keep your video on if you would like. It's your personal preference. I just ask that whatever is in your background be appropriate for public viewing. And again, please don't have anything distracting in the background. Finally, we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. However, if you'd like to submit your questions to me, you're welcome to do so via the chat. So send them on in as they come up. Hopefully they're answered as we go along. So if you want to jot them down on a little note, send them at the end, no problem, or turn on your microphone during the Q&A portion. Otherwise, I'm hopeful that this will help you with your off-campus housing search from start to finish, to and through your time off campus for however long that might be. Let's dive in. All right, so we are a one-stop shop for everything related to life off campus. Again, helping you with your off-campus housing search, helping you move into your space, your time in your space, if there's any conflicts or concerns. We'll do programming for you while you're in your space as well, and then we will assist you with your move out, potentially if you are a junior back onto campus for your senior year. So anything that comes up now, in the future, let us know. We're happy to help. And if we aren't the right resource, we're certainly going to point you in the right direction. We have at our disposal what we call the off-campus housing database. You can find it at this web address on your screen. This is our listing service, I guess you could say, our apartments.com, but specifically for the Boston College community. This site allows you to view spaces in relation to our 3 campuses. And let's walk through it now, why don't we? I'll give you a little tour of the database. So you, again, can find this at offcampushousing.bc.edu. And you're going to notice that you can log in right here. You'll sign in as a student with your BC username and password. If you are a parent and you're on this call, you can create a guest account if you'd like. But there are 3 primary functions to the site: housing, roommates, and resources. We're going to go through all 3. Let's start with housing. So this is the housing tab right here. And as you can see, you can note all of the blue dots on your screen. And you'll see highlighted in gray 3 of our 4 Boston College campuses. Now, I imagine most of you are going to be intrigued or interested to live in the Brighton area, kind of abutting the Brighton campus, as well as our Chestnut Hill campus. So all of these blue dots are spaces that you could live that we currently have available on our site. And you can, of course, filter out, and I'd recommend you do so. You filter out exactly what it is that you're looking for, what type of lease you're looking for, when you're looking to move in, what type of accommodations. And in particular, an important one is the no agent or broker fee. These are listings that are posted to the site that do not come with a finder's fee, which we'll talk about in a moment. One cool little tool is that you can select all of our public transit. You can also select our BC shuttle routes, and you can see exactly where apartments are in relation to those shuttle routes. Really cool feature. Awesome. Let's take a look at a listing so you can get a sense of what that looks like. We're just going to take a look at the overlook at St. Gabriel's, mostly because I think the stained glass is really pretty. This is a luxury apartment complex in our area, and so I want to be mindful that the prices are going to be elevated as a result. A listing, you'll find all sorts of things: 3D models, videos, tours that have been recorded, plenty of photos of a number of different units. And you'll also see which units are available, how much they cost, and when they'd become available. If there are any models, you'll see those too. But most importantly, for most listings, I'm really going to direct you to the apartment description. This is where you're going to get a sense of the nuances of the space. Anything that can't be provided in a bullet point that you might see on above and below will be found in the apartment description section. Really cool resource for you. Now, if you find yourself interested in this or any other listing, you could heart it to save it to your profile after you log in so you can come back to it later. Or you can message the apartment complex or the lister directly through the database here, or you can call them. All three are available to you. I tend to recommend that students do both, that they both reach out through the database, but they also call. Really great opportunity to connect with potential listings. The second part of the off-campus housing database is the roommate finder feature. This is our way to assist students with finding roommates, and a good way to reduce your monthly rent is to live with a roommate, and in particular, a direct roommate, somebody who you share an off-campus bedroom with, much like you share a bedroom with somebody on campus. Now, you'll notice that there are students that are both Boston College students as well as students from other institutions. The reality is you can live with anybody that you would like at any time. You're not restricted to living with just BC folks, and so we connect our platforms with platforms at other institutions. Now, if you're going to live with a non-BC person, I really typically only see that happening if you're going to live with a BU student, because it's easy to get to both campuses. Both of our institutions are right along the beeline, and so if you pick an apartment that's right in the middle, each of you goes in opposite directions on the train and gets to school. Some things I want to point out here are really focused on the right-hand side. You can filter out those folks who have a place, they've signed a lease, and yet they have a vacant bedroom in their apartment and they need that filled. You can click those and click this and see those folks here. Or if you are looking for folks who neither have roommates nor a place to live, you would want to click this filter here, I need a place. There's all sorts of filter options here. But again, you can create your own roommate profile and go ahead and view the profiles of others to find somebody that you're really compatible with. Lastly, we have the resources page here, this third tab. You can search any number of resources. We have a ton. The agents and brokers tab we will review in particular here in a moment. But this is the third resource that we have available. We also have our off-campus housing website. There you can view recordings of this presentation and see what events we have coming up, but also review our frequently asked questions. You can find that at bc.edu/off-campus. All right, let's keep rolling here. You can reach out to us for anything by emailing us at offcampus@bc.edu, and that includes anything that you see here in today's presentation. Happy to dive in deeper with you. And again, point you in the right direction. All right, so let's walk through the apartment search process from start to finish. I'm not going to read these to you. You're welcome to take a photo of this slide if you would like. But what I will say is that you should focus on items number 4 and 6. Number 4, I have bolded here. You need to tour the apartment, checking for facilities and safety concerns before you sign anything, right? You wouldn't probably buy a house sight unseen, and you should not rent an apartment sight unseen. You also should not rely on a roommate of yours or a friend of yours to go view the space on your behalf, because each of you has different standards. Each of you is going to notice different things in the apartment, different facilities or safety concerns. Each of you is going to have different questions as you're touring that space. It's critical that you lay eyes on the apartment before you sign a legally binding contract that is very expensive. Most students, unfortunately, do not follow item number 4. They sign for an apartment without ever laying eyes on it. And this becomes a real problem when they go to move in, because they are paying a lot of money for an apartment that they realize is not quite as nice as they thought, and that their roommate made it out to be when they took the tour of the unit. Additionally, parents are often very upset when they see their student moving into a space that is very expensive and, again, not quite as nice as what they thought the unit would be. So it's critical, again, that you tour the apartments in whatever form or fashion, that you do so in person, especially because you're here now. Signing for something by the end of the school year is going to be really important so that you can view those spaces, again, in person. And item number 6 here, before you sign anything, you need to review all documentation at once, right? Because if you're using a rental agent, you have to pay the commission to the agent. And your commission is paid when your application is approved, not necessarily when you sign the lease, okay? And what this means is that if you apply for a place, but you realize that actually upon reading the lease after my application's been approved, that I don't want to live here, you are not going to get that finder's fee back. And so it's really important that you review everything up front so that when you apply for a space, you know that if I'm approved for that space, I'm going to sign the lease and I'm going to pay the finder's fee. It would be a real shame to be approved for a lease, not sign the lease agreement, and then lose out on the finder's fee. All right. So I really recommend that you review all that documentation at the same time. Now, I'd also recommend that you form your group, you stick with your group. You don't cut anybody, you don't drop anybody. That's silly, it's mean. We're not here for that. Find your group, stick with your group, and then tour multiple apartments. Really important that you tour multiple apartments so that you know what's in the area, right? If you were viewed apartment 1 here, let's say it's 2-bedroom for $2,000 a month, and then you didn't view apartment 2, it's impossible for you to know what leverage you have in the off-campus search process, right? Apartment 2 might be a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,800 a month. Equally as nice, same amenities. But if you didn't view that apartment, you would not be able to go back to apartment 1 and say, hey, look, your next door neighbor is offering me the same thing for a cheaper price, and I'm going to sign with them unless you come down in price. This is how I'd recommend that you do it. Unfortunately, I see a lot of students signing for the first apartment that they see. There's really no benefit to doing that. The apartment search process doesn't go as fast as people make it out to, especially your peers, your rental agents, right? Your rental agents want you to sign on the bottom line, on the dotted line, so that they can get paid. Don't sign the first apartment that you see without seeing other apartments. Things don't move quite as quickly as they make it out to. So you have time to go view some other spaces. There's no rush, I promise. You might often hear that your peers say that you need to sign for an off-campus apartment maybe in the spring of your first year at BC. That's crazy. I would never recommend a student do that. You're signing for an apartment for junior year in your first year at the university. It's really problematic because when students do that, again, they're signing a legal contract with folks that may not even be students at BC by the time junior year rolls around. They might transfer out. You might not be friends with them come junior year. I'd really recommend that you sign for an apartment in the spring semester of your sophomore year. So I imagine most of you are sophomores on today's Zoom. Sign for something in the spring. Again, there's no rush. And the reality is that the majority of students do that. The last survey we took in 2022, 54.1% signed in the spring or summer before their junior year. 10% signed a lease right now in the fall of their sophomore year, a year in advance, and an even smaller minority signed before that. So you might hear that there's a rush that you got to sign now. You do not, and the data that we have backs that up. Some things to know as you are forming your group and you're determining your monthly rent allowance. Your financial aid package may change by the fact that you're living off campus. Your cost of attendance really is three big things. It's three buckets. The first is tuition, the second's housing, and the third is board. So if you're not living on campus, that's your room, and you're not buying a meal plan, that's your board, your overall cost of attendance is going to be less. And as a result, your financial aid eligibility will be less. It will be reduced. And so it's going to be really important that you meet with your financial aid advisor before you determine what your monthly rent allowance can be. Now, BC tries to make up for the fact that you are living off campus, but nonetheless, each individual's financial aid package is going to be different. So it's really important that you meet with them to determine exactly what your aid package will look like for junior year. This is really important that you do this before you start a search. It's really important that you also have conversations with your roommates, your group, about how much you can afford in monthly rent, as well as what type of accommodations it is that you're looking for. Having those honest conversations is critical. Oftentimes, undergraduate students are required to offer up a guarantor. Now, a guarantor is somebody who will pay the monthly rent in the event that you cannot. This is really required because you don't have a full-time income. And you likely don't have a significant credit history or a significant amount of savings built up. And so landlords are going to require that guarantor. Now, this becomes a challenge, particularly for our international students who may not have US-based credit or a US-based guarantor. And so you can show an I-20 or a US savings account statement as it's going to have some information on it. Now, you may be a domestic student and not have ready access to a guarantor. So both you and our international students can look at a number of different options to waive that guarantor requirement. You can offer a larger security deposit or offer to pay several months in advance. And there are also third-party guarantors. So you pay money and they will serve as that guarantor. Now, I want to make note of these bullets here. You can offer this, but you cannot be asked this. And so if you are asked this, please let me know so I can guide you appropriately. Now, if you are not able to waive the guarantor requirement with the apartment that you are looking to apply to, you might need to look for another apartment. Large apartment complexes, such as the Overlook, which we looked at earlier, are more likely to require a guarantor than an individual landlord. And if you want to review this information in greater detail, you can find it on the Resources tab of our off-campus housing database. This is a document we've put together that really is just an overview of what guarantors are, what purpose they serve, who can be a guarantor, perhaps what are some options to waive that requirement. Okay, so if you ever want to refer back to this, again, it's on the Resources tab right here, and you can simply search guarantor in this search field, and this will be the first item to pop up. All right, back to our presentation. So speaking again of money here, it's the most important piece in an off-campus housing search. If you come to me and you say you would like some assistance finding an apartment, the first question I'm going to ask is, what's your monthly budget? So let's walk through this. These are our upfront costs that you can expect to pay as a result of signing a lease. And you would pay it when you sign the lease. You're going to pay that first month's rent. Let's say, for example, this is $2,000 for a two-bedroom apartment. We'll stick with that example. You're going to pay the first month's rent, right? You got to pay the first month. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's $2,000. You're also going to be asked to pay the last month's rent. Now, you're asked to pay this because the landlord doesn't want you to leave them high and dry at the end of the tenancy, right? you may be moving on to a different apartment or moving onto campus. And if you move early enough, or if your lease starts early enough, you may have some overlap in those tenancies, and they don't want you to just move off to the new place and not pay them that last month's rent. So they collect this up front as well. That's another $2,000 in this case, so we're up to $4,000 total. A security deposit, that's paid by you. Essentially, it's a slush fund that the landlord would hold onto in the event that you create damage to the unit beyond normal wear and tear. This typically is 1 month's worth of rent, though it can be less than that. Legally, it cannot be more than 1 month's rent, though. So please let me know if you're facing that. The security deposit would be returned to you if you do not create any damage in the apartment beyond normal wear and tear. But nonetheless, you got to pay it up front. So this is $2,000 additional dollars. We're up to $6,000 here. We're going to skip number 4. It's pretty minimal. Don't need to really worry about it. But number 5 is the finder's fee. If you use a rental agent, again, you'd be asked to pay the commission for that agent. That's different than most cities in America. But in Boston, that commission, that fee is passed on to the incoming tenant. And so the finder's fee can be any amount. However, if you're being asked to pay more than 1 month's worth of rent, you need to find a new agent. 1 month's worth of rent is the typical going rate. You could be asked to pay less than that. That's awesome if that's the case. Or you might be asked to pay no finder's fee by using an agent. That's incredible. But if you do use an agent, typically you would be expected to pay 1 month's worth of rent. In this case, another $2,000. So upon signing a lease, you need to have $8,000 available to secure it. So not only do you need to determine what your monthly rent allowance can be, but you also need to determine if you are liquid enough to afford this unit. So again, really important that you have all of this figured out before you start any off-campus housing search. One thing to know is that landlords can't charge non-refundable application fees. I just like to mention that. So if you find that, let me know. All right, we talked a little bit about this in the last slide, but security deposits are, again, that fund that landlords hold onto, 1 month's worth of rent in the event that you create damage to the unit. Typical example is a hole in the wall. That's well beyond normal wear and tear. And this security deposit needs to be placed in a separate interest-bearing account in a Massachusetts bank. Within 30 days of providing them the security deposit, you need to be issued a receipt with the name and location of the bank where the money is being held, the account number, and the amount of the deposit. Really, really important that you get that information, that you know where your money is at, because this is money that should be returned to you, less any costs incurred due to repairs for damage that you caused, right? So you have this security deposit, subtract any of those costs for repairs, and the remaining balance is to be returned with you within 30 days of the end of your tenancy. Now, sometimes we have students that have trouble getting their security deposit back. It's really important that you have this information here, that you receive that receipt so that you can get that security deposit back or go to court. We've already talked about the finder's fee. Again, that's the commission due to the rental agent. But one note I'd like to make is that a landlord cannot charge a finder's fee, even if the landlord also happens to be a licensed real estate agent. A real estate agent cannot be an agent for a property they own, and therefore cannot charge the finder's fee for their own property. If you find that to be the case, please let me know as soon as possible. I will say, there are a lot of agencies out there, but there are only a few that are allowed to post to our off-campus housing database because we partner with these folks. These are the agencies that are allowed to post to our database, and therefore we have some sense of trust with them. We can generally testify to the fact that they're going to conduct ethical business practices, and if they are not, please let me know as soon as possible so that I can have that addressed with them. Additionally, please know that our database is not free from scams. We do not vet every apartment that is on here. And so if something is too good to be true, send it to me. I'll take a look at it. And if it's a scam, I'll, one, thank you. And two, I'll have that removed as soon as possible and the lists are banned. So again, this site is perhaps a little more trustworthy than any other listing service, certainly more trustworthy than Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. So again, take a look at these agencies if you're looking for a rental agency to assist you with your search. It can be a great resource. They are there to help you facilitate the leasing process, to coordinate the lease. They also have access to listings that are not necessarily on our database because they're licensed. They have access to the MLS, the Multiple Listing Service, and that allows them to view spaces that may not be listed with us. So if you're not seeing what you would like on the database, an agency might be able to find exactly what it is that you're looking for. But because you pay the commission to them, they're going to pressure you. They may say you need to sign the lease by tonight or it'll be gone tomorrow. As I mentioned earlier, this is not true. That's not how the real estate market works. It's not gone tomorrow if you don't sign tonight. Nothing moves that quickly, even in Boston, where it is pretty fast sometimes. Do not rush. And find an agent that you trust. Shop around. We're going to host an off-campus housing fair. We'd recommend that you come visit, and all the agencies that I showed you on that page on the off-campus housing database are going to be there. Find an agent that you trust, that you feel has your best interests at heart. Do not fall for this. Do not sign the lease tonight because you think it's going to be gone tomorrow, because it's not, and they're just trying to earn their commission. A good agent wouldn't pressure you. All right, let's take a look at the rental cost comparison because we love to talk about the monthly rental costs. I'm going to share this screen right here. This is on the off-campus housing database again. This top half reflects the entire unit's worth of rent based on the type of accommodation as well as the location. So we'd see most undergraduate students probably going to be living in Bryan. That's where we see most folks. We will update this in January. These are just estimates, right? You, of course, could find something on the lower end of this or the higher end of this, or higher or lower than the range that's on the screen. But this is where we generally find most of these are landing. So this, again, is the entire unit's worth of rent, and you can divvy up that between your roommates however you like. This lower portion of the page is your estimated individual cost. Okay, let's jump back to our slideshow, because I've circled here $1,000 per month, because this is what you are currently experiencing by living on campus. You are living with others in a bedroom that you share, and you can expect for that type of accommodation to cost about $1,000 per month. Now, students who move off campus often want to have their own bedroom, which I get. I can appreciate that. But you should know that there's going to be an increasing cost, generally about $500 per month, to have your own bedroom while still living with roommates. Okay? And so that's kind of what you can expect to pay. Again, of course, you're going to find things on the outliers of these ranges, but this is just to help you get a sense of what your costs might be. Having a direct roommate is the best way to reduce your individual cost. And again, is no different than what you would have by living on campus. In the survey that we conducted in 2022, the majority of students are paying between $900 and $1,200 per month. Of course, there's a good chunk that pay more than that and a smaller chunk that pay less than that. But this is generally the range that we see students paying, to give you, again, some estimate of what those costs might look like. One thing to note is that the junior year is just different. You are now a citizen of Boston. There are additional expectations as a result of that, right? You are living in an off-campus neighborhood that is not just BC students like. You might be living on campus. You're surrounded by BC students. That's not the case off campus. You are surrounded by students, sure, but you're also surrounded by longtime neighbors who have raised their families there, have lived in the same house for 30 years, and are very protective of their neighborhood because they care about it a lot. And so the expectations off campus are going to be greater. There's no denying that. If you are looking to get into an off-campus house, one of the big party houses, I suppose I should say, and you haven't signed for that yet, you're probably too late. And the reality is you probably didn't want to live there anyway, because you and your 9 best friends, that's a lot of people to manage. It's a lot of expectations to manage. Additionally, I would just say if you're looking to host a big party, you really don't want to, because as I said, those expectations are really high off campus. And if a longtime neighbor is disturbed, they're not going to call the RA. Instead, they're going to call the police. And you could quickly find yourself in court with a court summons and a permanent mark on your record as a result. So that's what we mean by the junior year being different. I don't want that to happen to you. And so I'm just being upfront with you. Additionally, I would recommend that you keep your housing group to be smaller rather than larger, right? Because the more people you have in your group, the more people that you're living with, the more variables that you have to manage, the more potential problems that there could be. In particular, I want to point out that the city of Boston has a zoning ordinance limiting unrelated undergraduate students to 4 or fewer in a single unit. So I'd recommend that you stick to that. Again, the fewer people, the fewer potential problems, the fewer personalities to manage, etc. Now, if you are signing for a house with 4 or more folks, of course, you're going to be violating that ordinance. But I would not stress the city of Boston, if they find out about you living with more than 4 people, they're not going to kick you out of your unit, but they will cite the landlord for that. Now, as a result, some landlords may not want to sign all of you onto the lease agreement. That is a real problem, because if you are not signed as a signed tenant on the lease agreement, you have no legal rights. So do not let that be you. Get your name on the lease agreement, even if it means that you are listed as more than 4 people in the unit. But again, I'd recommend just stick to the ordinance. For the parents on this Zoom call, I would recommend that your student live in an apartment building over an individual house, duplex, or triplex. The reason we recommend this is because they're generally better maintained. They're also generally quieter, and we don't really see quite as many conduct violations coming out of those apartment buildings as opposed to a single family home that a group of students is renting. Another way that it's different is that all of you as a group are considered jointly and severally liable. This means that you and your 3 roommates are considered one entity in the eyes of the law. And so if one of you doesn't pay the rent, the remaining 3 need to come up with that share of rent to ensure that it's paid in full and on time. Additionally, if one of you violates the lease, all of you will be considered in violation of the lease agreement. All of you could be evicted, even if one of you is across the country in California at the time. It does not matter. You are considered jointly and severally liable in the eyes of the law. So it's really important, again, that you choose your roommates wisely and that you are all on the same page. Again, this is why we said the fewer people, the fewer problems. So choose your roommates wisely. Have these conversations up front. Do not sign a legally binding contract without having done so. So some of you, I imagine, are going to go abroad. You should check your lease agreement whether or not subletting is allowed. Oftentimes it says that the landlord has the final say on any sublessee to move into the space. Ultimately, you should have this conversation before you sign anything. Get it into the lease that you're allowed to sublet your space. Additionally, I would ask, how long does a tenant need to be there for a sublet to be allowed, right? Some landlords say that subtenants need to be there for 4 months or more. Well, if that's the case, then you can't really sublet during the summer, which is 3 months. And so having, again, these conversations before you sign anything, really important. Now we have what we call a sublet guide that'll walk you through the process start to finish. One thing that's really cool about the database is that you as BC students can post your sublet available to the site for free. You can create your own little listing. And that way students will be able to view your space. They'll be able to reach out to you through the site or call you based on the phone number that you leave. It's a great way for us to help you get a student into your space while you're abroad so that you can recoup some of that money. And so if you want to sublet your space, come talk to us. We also have a how to sublease guide. how to find a space to move into. In either case, both of you are going to want to sign a Massachusetts agreement to sublease sublet. This is an agreement that is essentially like a mini lease. You as the sublessor are obligated to provide the space, and you as the sublessee are obligated to pay the sublessor the monthly rent. You need to make sure that this is signed, especially as a sublessor. You need to make sure it's signed because you want to get the money that you are owed because somebody's living in your space that you are paying for. Again, typically a sublessee would pay the sublessor, who would then pay the landlord. We've got all this in our How to Sublet guide, but if I could say one thing about studying abroad, I would really recommend that you consider studying abroad in the fall semester. There is a lot more inventory in the off-campus area around sublets in the spring when you return. And if you want to avoid signing a 12-month lease and just want to sublet for the semester that you are at BC, I'd recommend that you study abroad for the fall. Because if you study abroad in the spring, typically what we see students doing is that they'll sign a 12-month lease with their friends, they'll move into the space for the fall, and then they will go abroad in the spring, and then they'll need to find a subtenant for the spring, but they also may need to find a subtenant for the summer because, again, that lease is 12 months in duration. So study abroad in the fall, a great option for you to avoid all that entirely. But nonetheless, we are here to help you find a sublet regardless of the semester. All right, the fall 2024 class date begins on Monday, August 26th. This is a challenge because historically, leases in the area begin on September 1st. I want to say that there's no temporary on-campus accommodations that are available to you, so you'll need to work with your agent, your landlord, or your property manager to discuss an earlier move-in. We have some other options that we've brainstormed, so if you run into this challenge, let us know. Typically, however, we don't really see this being a huge issue, especially if you are taking over for students who are moving back to campus. We try to get those students from off-campus to on for their senior year so that you can move into your off-campus space early. So nonetheless, if this is a problem for you, reach out to us. We've got some potential solutions. Okay, real quickly, housing appeals. If you'd like to appeal for an additional semester or a year of on-campus housing, let's say you're looking to study abroad for one semester and be living on campus for that other semester, because you only have 3 years of housing, you need to file a housing appeal. You can submit an appeal for any reason. You can submit an appeal for as many times as you would like. We just ask that you submit new information with each new appeal. Now, we would say most appeals are probably going to be denied, again, because availability on campus is very limited. But there's two primary reasons that an appeal would be approved. The first is that you have high financial need and that you would benefit by living on campus. If that's you, you need to submit all the new and most up-to-date financial information to Student Services, to your financial aid advisor, and they will determine exactly what level of need it is that you have. And in that determination, it'll tell the Office of Residential Life whether or not your appeal can be approved. The other reason that we would see an appeal approved is for documented accessibility related disabilities. This is typically somebody who is wheelchair bound that would simply not be able to access their education in the same way a student who is of able body. But again, you're welcome to submit an appeal for any reason at any time. Certainly, appeals that do not fall on either of these categories are approved. But again, we simply cannot approve every appeal that is submitted. And if you have new information that arises, you can, again, as I said, submit appeals as many times as you like. One way to avoid living off campus is to become a resident assistant. And so if you're not planning to go abroad and you want to be an RA, it's a great opportunity, awesome experience. I myself was an RA. I've supervised RAs. It's really an incredible time. Make some of your best friends there. And if you'd like to apply, please know that the application deadline is Monday, November 1st. And if you scan that QR code on your screen, you'll be taken to the application page. You can apply on MyResLife on Agora. And last but not least, I mentioned this earlier, but we welcome to the off-campus housing fair. on Thursday, October 12th from 3 to 5 in the Vandy Cabaret Room. Come with your roommates, come with your group. Come mix and mingle with rental agents, see what they have available for the coming year. They'll be able to show you pictures, perhaps take you on a virtual tour. And we'll have pizza and soda, and I'll be there to answer any and all of your questions about life off campus. We'll also have representatives there from the Office of Residential Life to answer your questions about the RA application if you would like to apply. All right, so if you've got questions, go ahead and send them on in to me. I'm happy to answer those, but that is the conclusion of our formal presentation. I really appreciate your time. If you'd like to visit us, please see us in Maloney Hall, Suite 448, or again in the Office of the Dean of Students. You can give us a call at the number on the screen or simply email us. That's perhaps the best way to get in touch because both me and my graduate assistant will be able to monitor that email account and reach us at offcampus@bc.edu. So we'll just pause here for those questions to come on in. Well, while we're waiting for folks to type out the questions, I did want to show you one last thing here. This again is our off-campus page on the BC domain. We're again in the Office of the Dean of Students for off-campus student living. This is our page here. You'll be able to see all the events that we host. They'll pop up here. If you ever forget the URL for our off-campus housing database, never fear. It's right here. You can simply click this button. Or if you'd like to watch an old recording of this presentation, you're welcome to do so here. And it'll take you to our YouTube page. Most importantly, though, take a look at the frequently asked questions page where most of your questions can be answered. This is what we get most often. Take a look at this and we will likely be able to answer that at the forefront. Okay, so we've got a couple questions coming in here. So when discussing financial aid, you mentioned that BC tries to make up for the fact that you're living off campus. Can you elaborate? I can't elaborate much in detail because I don't work in financial aid, but what I would say is that the financial aid office tries to adjust students' individual aid packages, perhaps to provide some additional funding. Each student is different. So that's about all I can elaborate there. I'm so sorry I can't provide additional information. Your financial aid advisor would be the most helpful in answering that. Another question, are finder's fees charged each person's individual rent or total rent? It's a great question. So when you sign the lease, the finder's fee is 1 month's rent that all of you would pay together. And so remember that you're jointly and severally liable. So that means that you are considered one person. So all of you together would collectively pay 1 month's worth of rent as the finder's fee. It would not be each person paying one total month's rent as their contribution to the finder's fee. That would be way too much money. I mean, it's already a lot of money. So simply you and your group would just pay 1 additional month's rent collectively as the finder's fee. I hope that answers your question. Students returning from fall abroad, can they apply for on-campus housing? And if so, what are the criteria? You certainly can apply for on-campus housing. You can submit an on-campus housing appeal. There are no criteria to submit an appeal, and I cannot guarantee that there will be space in the spring semester. All I can say is that historically, there has been space for some folks who are returning from fall abroad if they would like to live on campus to do so. But I cannot guarantee that, and we certainly wouldn't be able to know whether or not those appeals could be approved really until spring semester once we determine who exactly is going abroad. Any additional questions regarding that should be directed to the Office of Residential Life. But appeals are reviewed on a rolling basis, so anybody's welcome to submit an appeal for any reason. Once a housing appeal is filed, how long does it take to receive a decision? This is fluctuated from year to year, but in recent years, we have waited to make a decision on the housing appeal acceptance or declination until housing applications have been submitted to the university. It will be the springtime before we release a huge batch of appeals. We do release smaller batches. Those students who we know their appeal will be approved will hear from us first. and that will take place late fall semester, early spring semester. So again, the appeal application opens up in October. And so we'll start reviewing those in early November. So again, I can't give you a definitive take, depends on your specific appeal and what you're putting in that. Another question, if you apply to be an RA by November 1st, when do you find out if you're accepted and allowed to live on campus? Ooh, I love that question. The hiring process concludes by the end of the fall semester so that you have plenty of time to determine whether or not you want to accept. And if you don't want to accept, you can form your group for an off-campus housing search, okay? So we conclude that hiring process by the end of the fall semester. Question, what compromises RA training? There are 2 weeks of RA training in the summer prior to the start of the fall semester with some remote training. But it's a great time. Lots of friends to be made, lots of fun to have. So I really recommend being an RA if you're interested. It's a really cool and incredible opportunity. When are students notified of their appeal decision? One question I got at last night's information session is whether or not it's typical that students can sign an 8-month lease or a 4-month lease as opposed to a 12-month lease. The reality is it's not really common practice in our area. Most students who are going to sign a lease with a landlord are expected to sign for a full 12 months. If you do negotiate a shorter lease term, you typically would be expected to pay more per month as a result. So just to keep that in mind. Other questions? Send them on in. Yeah, 12-month lease. Somebody asked about a 12-month lease. Yes, most leases in the area start on September 1st and last a full 12 months. Again, it's really not common that we see leases to be shorter than that unless you are a subtenant. Certainly, you're able to perhaps find a month-to-month lease, but you would be expected to pay a higher rate each month as a result of having that flexibility. I do know that the school year ends in May. You would be expected to pay in full on time in each month by the 1st for the full 12 months. Are there any meal plans available to off-campus students so they can get lunch on campus between classes? Absolutely. There's a number of options. They can find that out on our BC website, and you'll be able to see the varying plans for students. So take a look at that. I'm looking at it right now. So yes, definitely. I'll just point this out to you right here to everyone in the chat. So if you want to look at meal plans, you can certainly buy one. Any last minute questions, folks? Send them on in. These are good ones. All right. Well, in that case, if you'd like to reach us, the best way is to email us at offcampus@bc.edu. This is the best way to get in touch with us because both me and my graduate assistant monitor this inbox. Though you're welcome to call us. We certainly love to talk on the phone too. And our phone number is 617-552-3075. Please reach out to us there. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We've had a great time. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Take care.